Many things decay in the heat and humidity of the forest, but folk memory lasts. Archaeologists can't be certain that Asante's ancestors came from exactly this spot, but the belief in forest origins does chime with what historians have established. The ancestors of Asante were Akan people whose language is still spoken. The Akan hunted and foraged for food around 600 years ago. But 300 years later, a sophisticated kingdom had emerged. In between, the Akan people and their environment went through a significant and rapid transformation. Before a community could establish itself in one place, a major obstacle had to be overcome: the forest. Just unbelievable. If you think the original Asante, that they cleared this forest, trees of that size, by hand. During the peak of the forest clearance 500 years ago, the Akan used axes to weaken the trunks and then pulled the trees down with twine. Clearing the forest was a vital precondition for settled society. Before that, Akan people were part of a hunter-gatherer society. With the forest cleared, agriculture could happen. Only with the space to cultivate land and grow food crops could groups of Akan people expand their populations. Today, in a forest in the west of Ghana, machinery makes short work of ancient trees. Hardwood timber, such as mahogany and teak, is among Ghana's most important exports. Licensing regulations attempt to protect the environment, but there's an understanding among forestry workers that Ghana's history is worth safeguarding too. The forest, it's important to the people, to the Akan. The forests are important, are they?
Yes, it means something to the people. We have some areas we don't enter. We name the place, maybe this is the place where Asante people come from. Mm-hmm. Yes, so the forest is very important to us.
For the Akan people in the 15th and 16th centuries, forest clearance was mind-boggling work. Researchers have calculated that for one man to clear 1 hectare, it would take him 500 days to remove more than 1,200 tons of vegetation. And since the fertility of the soil deteriorates so quickly, he would have to rotate his crops, meaning he would need to clear 6 hectares to feed his family. Faced with such an enormous task, the Akan people needed additional labour. There weren't enough of their own people to do the job, so they used slaves. An expert in the early Akan societies that were the foundation of the Asante Kingdom is Dr. Wilhelmina Donko.
Yes, I mean, importing people from outside was a really useful venture for them. Traders from outside coming in. At different times, they must have brought in people even from possibly as far afield as maybe Nigeria, the Senegambian areas, and so on.
How did this early kind of slavery differ from transatlantic slavery, which comes slightly later?
The system that operated here was quite different in the sense that unfree people or people of unfree descent could marry, have offspring of their own, could accumulate property and all that, and sometimes they could even marry into the lineages of their shall I say, their masters or the people who had initially procured them. So it wasn't very hostile. It did not remove the basic humanity of those who had lost their freedom. But still, it's a loss of freedom in the sense that you were removed from your own kinsmen to join a different set of people.
With the help of unfree labour, the Akan made clearances in the forest on an unprecedented scale. For the first time, the forest was a viable place to have organised settled societies. It was still 200 or 300 years before the Asante Kingdom, but this achievement had a long-lasting effect.
The act of clearing the forest shaped Akan identity. There was a great sense of pride that this effort against the forest had been successful, but that only drove the imperative to do more.
Farmers settled in the cleared areas and grew crops needed to support an expanding population. Today, cultivation still happens among the dense undergrowth.
This is your farm, is it?
This is my farm.
And can you tell me what sort of produce do you farm here?
Yeah, I do produce this type of fruit, which is plantain.
Yeah.
I planted this, and it takes 1 year to harvest. This is called cocoyam, and I planted cocoyam.
It's like a potato. It's a starchy.
Yeah, it's starchy like potato.
Yeah. How do you keep back all of the weeds and the big trees that seem to be growing so voraciously on the edge of your farm?
We use this cutlass, so all of them will come once and weed everything.
Having cleared space for agriculture, the ancestors of Asante were determined to make the most of it. The pursuit of abundance quickly became ingrained in the Akan psyche.
The productiveness of the forest required a lot of hard work, much of it carried out by slaves. But none of that could have happened without a commodity that the Akan exchanged for slaves in the first place.
Still found deep within the forest is the precious resource that paid for labour and transformed the Akan people. I'm on my way to one of the 10 largest gold mines in the world. This is the Obuasi gold mine. Today, gold-bearing rock is extracted from shafts that reach 1,500 meters underground. A chemical process separates the precious metal from the ore, and smelting results in gold bullion.
The heat is so intense, I've never felt anything like it. It's unbelievable.
Gold worth over £6 billion at today's prices has been extracted from here since the end of the 19th century. But it's been mined in this region for a lot longer than that.
No one now knows when the Akan people discovered gold, but it is clear that they were mining it when they were clearing the forests in the 15th century.
In those days, the gold was found much nearer the surface, and it was smelted by the Akan using Iron Age technology. The precious resource was critical to the transformation of the forest and to the foundations of the Asante Kingdom. And gold provided by the forest gave the people a significant place in a much wider economy. Akan gold found its way to North Africa and beyond via trans-Saharan trade routes, and gold paid for not just slaves, but textiles, brass, copper and salt. From the 1470s, Akan gold had a direct route to Europe via Portuguese merchants on the coast. In exchange for gold, they sold guns. A map made by a merchant in the 16th century shows who the Portuguese were dealing with. The most successful Akan were amassing power. The developing entrepreneurial spirit would have a major impact on culture in the Kingdom of Asante.
The Akan businessmen had accumulated gold, slaves and land, and they were known as Berempong, big men. And they shared one thing in common, one ultimate symbol of authority.
It wasn't a crown, or even gold regalia. It was a small wooden stool. The village of Awia is a centre of stool craftsmanship. Every stool is carved from a single piece of sese wood. The finest stools made here are used by senior figures in Ghanaian society. Less ornate stools are for everyday use and tourist souvenirs. According to leading Asante scholar, Professor Kwame Ahim, the stool was more than a seat to the Akan big men.
It is a symbol of status. Now, status in the sense of authority, power, and standing in society. And it begins with the earliest lineage, the family unit. The eldest had to have a symbol of authority over everybody. So then he had a stool made for him.
And why is the stool the symbol?
I suppose the material used for it was durable, because he wanted it to last. Now, a stool is a way of remembering, or a means of remembering.
So in a way that the stools actually became symbols of the history,
That's
and
right.
also at the same time
the symbols of office, symbols of authority, symbols of power, and also reminders of their particular achievements.
The experience of literally hacking their culture out of the forest was bound up in Akan stools. They helped to emphasize the roots of their organized society, and much more.
It's not just about rootedness, it's also about power, about lineage, about family. They actually have, in the center of them, an empty space where people could put things that they treasured, that brought this object to life, made it more than just a seat. It became, in a way, a vessel that carried history.
The stool's authority translated into political power for its chief. As the communities around each stool grew, they became less a collection of farmers and workers and more like highly centralized states. By the mid-1600s, dozens of independent village communities had turned into a patchwork of Akan states. The most powerful was Denchira. It controlled some of the richest gold mines in the forest. For decades, its neighbors sent tribute by way of slaves and other gifts to keep the peace. But Denchira's position as the most powerful of the Akan states was not to last.
I'm on my way to the birthplace of the man who challenged Denchira and in the process founded the Asante Kingdom.
Denchira's demands on its neighbors left it with few friends and many enemies. In 1701, an alliance of states defeated Denchira in battle. The leader of the alliance was Osai Tutu, the first Asantehene, or king of Asante. According to legend, the village of Aninam is where it all started.
This is a beautiful place.
I've been offered a guided tour by the chief of the nearby town.
This place is particularly special, though, isn't it?
The speciality came as a result of the birth of Osei, which happened here.
So Osai Tutu was born here.
Let us go to the house.
Osai Tutu is thought to have been born sometime during the 1640s. There are very few certainties known about him, but I find it peculiar that there aren't even many artistic impressions of what he might have looked like. The chief is taking me to see one of the very few.
And this is where the woman was always sitting down to take care of the child after washing the child. And these are some of
This little shrine shows an infant Osai Tutu in his mother's arms. It doesn't give much of an idea of what the man was like.
What kind of person was he?
He was a mysterious man, a warrior, a builder, who was able to establish a kingdom. In fact, if we will not be blaspheming, he was our Christ.